The Anglican Church, like a number of top churches, is not a democracy. It's a sort of benign tyranny. But at the moment, the Anglican Church is turning into a pantomime, a mirage of public involvement masquerading as meaningful engagement. And the Church of England, reeling from the grotesque failure of leadership in Justin Welby, has now produced this public consultation, an exercise as hollow as a school survey about the appointment of a new head teacher. The illusion of choice is laid before us, yet the decision remains firmly within the grasp of an ecclesiastical elite, the government and the king, guided by the will of the people, not by the whisperings of the Crown Nominations Commission. Justin Welby's resignation was not a triumph of accountability, but a damage limitation exercise following the exposure of a festering wound in the institution's moral fabric. And the Macon Review detailed in appalling specificity the abuses perpetrated by John Smith QC, a man who wielded religious authority to attack as many as 130 young men. And that this horror was facilitated, ignored, and ultimately shielded by the Church's hierarchy is itself a moral failing of the highest order. That Welby's failure to act decisively a decade ago has only now resulted in his resignation speaks volumes about the institutional reliance on delay and the reluctance to embrace true reform. And so, in a bid to appear responsive, the Church offers us this consultation, this charade of public input in which we may suggest names but not actually select them. We are invited to opine on the gifts, qualities and skills required of the next Archbishop of Canterbury, but the final decision remains firmly within the grasp of the CNC, an unelected body populated by church leaders, bishops and select international representatives. They will deliberate behind closed doors, sift through the themes emerging from our heartfelt suggestions and ultimately select one of their own from a predetermined pool of senior clergy. This isn't an appointment by popular acclamation, a tradition that once allowed genuine public endorsement of church leadership. This is theatre, and not good theatre. The CNC would deliberate, pray, reflect and emerge months later with a carefully selected figurehead, as though the entire process were an act of divine revelation rather than an institutional self-preservation effort. The Prime Minister will then rubber stamp their choice, as is convention, before passing it to the monarch for formal approval. The public, whose participation was solicited with much fanfare, will be thanked for their contributions and swiftly forgotten. What then is the purpose of this consultation? It's not to provide genuine democratic legitimacy, but to create the illusion of that. It's a public relations exercise, a distinction from a distraction from the festering wounds of scandal, abuse, and institutional negligence. It's a sop to those who might dare to question the legitimacy of the archaic system in which the highest spiritual office of the land is filled not by transparent election, but by the quiet deliberations of a select few. The Anglican Church faces an existential crisis, not merely of leadership, but of moral authority. Its credibility is in tatters, shredded by scandal after scandal, by apologies issued too late and too reluctantly. If it wishes to rebuild trust, it must do so not with tokenistic gestures, but with radical transparency. We need to see those people who are making the decisions, rather like the conclave of cardinals. At least that would be honest. But this behind doors secrecy, where we don't even know who the actors are who are making the decisions, that isn't honest, that isn't religious, that's tyrannical. And the Church shouldn't ask the public for suggestions while knowing full well that it will ignore them. If it's serious about public participation, it would open the process to genuine scrutiny, allow for real nominations, and embrace the very democratic ideals it pretends to uphold. Instead, we're left with this, a grandiose exercise in empty engagement, a consultation designed to lend legitimacy to a predetermined outcome. A mirage of democracy conjured up by an institutional desperation to appear reformed while remaining firmly in control. The Church may well anoint a new archbishop in due course, but let's not pretend that the public had any real say in the matter. This consultation is not democracy. It's a PR exercise, a ceremonial nod to participation that ultimately changes nothing.